Continuing near the end of the Maimer, Alpayim Shana Kadma Torah L'Olam, that the Rebbe said on Shavuos Tafshin Yud Aleph. And continuing from yesterday, where we're learning the idea of the different levels that there are in Torah, and in this way we'll understand why when the Gemara wants to talk about the greatness of Torah, it doesn't mention the first thing of Va'eyetzli Amoin, but it rather mentions the Shashuim Yoim Yoim, the fact that Torah is in the intellect, which is above the world, Alpayim, the two Elephs, the two learnings of Chachma and Bina. And so let's go through the concepts of what the different levels of the greatness of Torah. Va'eyetzli Amoin is when the Torah says, I was or will be revealed by Hashem. That's the power of Atzmos, the essence of Hashem. That level of Torah is not something with which we can praise the Torah. It's not something with which we can reveal the praises of the Torah because it's hidden. There it's totally one with Hashem beyond being revealed in the world. And as we mentioned a few times before, the idea that even as it becomes the tool for creation of the world, it's only the tool for showing that the world is not anything other than Hashem. But in essence, that level of Torah can't be praised because it's not revealed. It's Torah the way it's totally one with Hashem. The only way we can begin to speak about the praises of Torah is Va'eryeh Shashuim Yoim Yoim, is the pleasure. When Torah becomes something which causes pleasure, when does it cause pleasure? And as we said, similar to a person down here, that the pleasure is caused not by the essence of pleasure, because that's something that's hidden, but rather through Chachma and Bina, through understanding. Wisdom and understanding, which that causes pleasure. That's the Shashuim Yoim Yoim, the 2 days, the 2,000s, the 2 Elephs, the 2 learnings, the Aleph Chachma and Aleph Bina. Then the Torah becomes even more revealed, because when it's in Chachma and Bina, it's above the world, and it becomes revealed into a way of tzchaik. Not just pleasure, but tzchaik, where it's abundance of laughter. And that's when it already comes into the level that connect to the world. Starting from the midas, the way they're above the world, and that's why it's b'chol eis. It's within the realms of time, but they're all together. Continuing on to misachekes b'tevel arts and malchus, which is already the way it comes into the world, and until when is it fully revealed? When it's Shashuah B'nai Adam, when it's with the people. Which means that all of the first levels that we spoke about, even including the Misachekes B'Tevel Artzei, which is why it doesn't say Shashuim again. Because part of the pleasure of Chachma and Bina, part of the pleasure from above, of the understanding of Torah, the way it comes from above, is that it reveals itself even more into B'chal Eis, into the Midas, and even more than that, into Malchus, Misachekes, in the way of Tzchaik, and abundance of laughter. Then there's Shashuah again, the next level of pleasure. The full depths of pleasure, which that's Shashuah B'nai Adam, when it comes into the world. That's the difference between Ur Yashar and Ur Chayzer. Everything that was up until now is the way it's revealed from above. And similar to a person. In a person can understand something and get pleasure from understanding it, to the extent that the understanding even causes the pleasure to be felt in midas, in emotions. But then when a person works hard, when a person toils in order to understand something, and it's tough, and they have to deal with questions and answers and discussion, and work hard to get to understand it, that pleasure is a deeper pleasure, because it's a pleasure that came from within the person. It's not just I understood something that someone else explained to me. I worked hard in order to understand it on my own. That's called Or Chayzer. Or Chayzer, the bouncing light, the light that bounces up from below. And that's the greatest pleasure of Hashem that's revealed within the world. That's revealed not only with the light of Torah, how it comes down into the world, but when it's finally the light comes in a way that it's expressed within the world. That's called Or Chayzer. That's Shashuah B'nei Adam, that's a new level of pleasure. Now in Or Chayzer itself, in the mashal, in the analogy of a person, there's two types. There's one type of Or Chayzer, when a person, the Or Chayzer, meaning the concealment, is the fact that there's questions and discussion until the person reaches the full understanding of what the idea is. That's similar to the difference between Talmud Bavli and Talmud Yerushalmi. Talmud Bavli is called B'machshakim Yeshivani. Talmud Bavli is how Hashem put me in a dark place, which in the simple sense means in Babel they used to learn in basements, where it was dark. But the depth is the concept. It's dark. I don't understand the idea. I have to ask, argue, discuss, until I can finally reach the solution. Talmud Yerushalmi is above the world. It's light, it's bright. Talmud Yerushalmi is Talmudah Shel Eretz Yisrael, and especially of Yerushalayim, where everything is bright, where everything is revealed. There is no need for arguments and discussions. And yet, despite the fact that in the simple sense, the Talmud of Yerushalmi is so much higher and so much greater, but there is an advantage in the Talmud Bavli of Or Chayzer, of the fact that it's the light that's bouncing back, that's reflecting from below. That advantage is to extend, number one, that the halacha is like Talmud Bavli, because in this world, in the practical decision of what to do in the practical world, it has to go like Talmud Bavli. You need, in order to understand, to reach Dvar Havaya Zu Halacha, to reach the word of Hashem being revealed in the world. For that we need to have the Or Chayzer. In addition to that, we know that the Gemara tells us that the Reb Zera fasted 40 fasts in order to be able to go from Babel to Eretz Yisrael and learn Talmud Yerushalmi. He wanted to forget everything from Talmud Bavli so that he should be able to learn Talmud Yerushalmi. Why does he need to forget? Usually when I know something and I want to know something more, then the way to do it is through what I know already. I don't have to forget what I learned already. On the contrary, something that I know is going to help me understand even better. But the reason is because in this case, the Ein HaRoich, the in comparison, the fact that it's totally incomparable, Talmud Bavli and Talmud Yerushalmi, is in a way that if you know Talmud Bavli, it will only confuse your ability to know Talmud Yerushalmi. But in the same way that it's incomparable, the greatness and the simple level between the light, the extreme, supreme light of Talmud Yerushalmi is incomparably greater than that of Talmud Bavli. The Maila, the advantage that there is in Talmud Bavli from the fact that it's Or Chayzer, from the fact that it comes from below, is also something that's incomparable to Talmud Yerushalmi. That's the idea of what we call Or Chayzer. Or Chayzer is in a way that it's totally incomparable. We can't even relate them to each other. That's how much stronger and more powerful is the great pleasure and the great realization that we're able to reach through Or Chayzer. Why? Because then we can reveal it in the world. The purpose of creation is that it should be revealed in the world. When there's hardship, similar to the idea of water, when it has something holding it back, there's a blockage in the middle of the water, and the water piles up, and until when the blockage goes away, it comes with much greater force. And the same thing when there's something which I have to fight with in order to get to the answer. The force of the answer and the force of the realization is something so much more powerful. That's one meaning of Ar Chayzer. But there's another idea of Ar Chayzer. The other idea of Ar Chayzer is when a person is tzikvetched, when a person himself is condensed, he's tightened, he's afraid to do something wrong. So it's not the idea of the fighting with the things that stand in the way down here, but it's standing in a state of fear of doing something wrong, of going against what I'm supposed to do. In other words, this is the understanding of the halacha because I'm afraid to go away from the truth. Or the doing and the performing of the mitzvahs with the fear of going against what I'm supposed to do. Seemingly over there's no pleasure. In the first level, it's true that it's hard work, it's toil, it takes a lot of work to get there, but that work, the pleasure that comes from it is unbelievable. But in this situation, when I'm afraid, what kind of pleasure is there from fear, from being afraid to go away from the truth? And the Rebbe explains this with an analogy. You have a minister, the servant of the king. He's afraid to go against the king. He's afraid to do things different than what the king wants. But when this servant or this minister is so one and so connected to the king, that for him, he and the king are one, then the fact that the king's will is being fulfilled is the greatest pleasure for him. And in the same way, in this Ar Chayzer, the fact that I'm afraid to go away from what Hashem wants. But if in my life everything is so one with Hashem, that causes the greatest pleasure, that Hashem's will is being fulfilled by the fact that specifically down here, specifically in the physical world, what Hashem wants is being fulfilled. That's the greatest and deepest possible pleasure. So now, what we have is the concept of Ar Yashar and the concept of Ar Chayzer, and that's the two levels of pleasure in Torah. In Ar Yashar, only when Torah is revealed, and that's why when the Gemara starts talking about the greatness of Torah on its own, the way it's above the world, it didn't speak about Etzlai when Torah is still hidden, because that you can't speak about a greatness of that. But it spoke about how when Torah begins to be revealed. But then there's something even deeper, which is Va'eya, which will only be revealed fully in the time of Mashiach. That's the full pleasure of Ar Chayzer, specifically in the second level, where a person becomes so one with Hashem that what Hashem wants, that's my will, and I have pleasure that Hashem's will is being fulfilled. And the ultimate of Hashem's will is specifically Shashua is B'nai Adam, is the fact that it's in the world. The fact that the Torah actually affects the world. The fact that the world is being elevated and that the world is being run and guided according to the will and the desire of the Torah, according to what Hashem wants. That pleasure is the ultimate pleasure, which isn't the pleasure of a person. It's not the pleasure of the Nivraim. The pleasure of Ar Yashar is the light, the revelation that causes a spiritual pleasure, a pleasure of understanding, a pleasure of grasping godliness that comes in the spiritual entities and eventually even in the physical entities down here. The pleasure of Ar Chayzer, the ultimate pleasure of Ar Chayzer, is not Tainug Nivra, it's not the pleasure of the creation as a separate entity from Hashem. It's the ultimate pleasure, the pleasure of the Creator in a way that it becomes one with the person. And the difference between that and between these two levels of pleasure is whether it's a pleasure that comes from an existence or an ultimate pleasure that comes from the depths of the essence of Hashem. Now that full depth of the essence of Hashem is only going to be revealed in the time of Mashiach. In the time of Mashiach, when there won't be a difference between the Creator and the creation. We know that in the time of Mashiach, mitzvahs b'telas, there won't be mitzvahs. What does it mean there won't be mitzvahs? Mitzvahs never disappear. There won't be mitzvahs as a commandment. They'll come automatically. A person will automatically do what's right because it will be revealed the essence of the creation, how it's one with the essence of the Creator. And this, the Rebbe explains, is also the difference between the two levels of the time of Mashiach. One level that there is in the time of Mashiach is when there'll be a Suda. Hashem will make a great meal for the tzaddikim in the time of Mashiach, a great party. And the other idea is that in the time of Mashiach there's not going to be any eating or drinking. That's the difference of a pleasure that comes from the feeling and the existence of the person, or the pleasure that comes from how the person is totally beyond existence. That's basically what we've learned in this Maimer, and the basic concept of it. Today is Yud Beis Sivan, the end of the days of Tashlumin, when we complete Kabbalah Satayra. The idea of Kabbalah Satayra, and the ultimate of Kabbalah Satayra, is the revelation that comes from above, but that revelation doesn't remain on Shavuos. It's completed in the days which are weekdays after Shavuos. In a time when the Torah is within the world, when the Torah affects the world and affects the person to change the physical world to become one with Hashem.